There's a case in Ontario about an elderly man who lives in the same house as his son. And the son has made the house into two separate apartments. Between the two apartments, there's a door, and the son keeps that door locked. His father is 84-year-old Arnold, and Arnold is not doing great. He wanders the neighborhood, he gets confused, he locks himself out of the house because he can't leave the house. His neighbors often see him wandering around, also not dressed for whatever season it is, and his belt is a piece of rope. The neighbors are slowly but surely starting to get worried about Arnold. The son, whose name is Dennis, has power of attorney over his dad. And the son is very aware of what's going on with his father, but he's not providing regular food or medical care for him. The door that he closes between his apartment and his dad's apartment is more than just a physical door. It's a metaphorical door. The son does not open the door between him and his dad. Eventually, the neighbors call the police. When the police arrives, they find Arnold in a state. 84-year-old Arnold is dirty, he's incontinent, and he's unable to tell them his address. The police take him to the hospital and they run several tests on him. It turns out that Arnold suffers from early stage Alzheimer's. And the doctor notes on the record that his dementia may have been developing for the past 2 years already. The son, Dennis, is charged with failing to provide the necessities of life. He's convicted, and the judge says that he shows heartless indifference to his father's condition, to the point where it amounted to cruelty. Dennis gets sentenced to 6 months in prison and 2 years of probation. Case closed, I guess. But here's my question. I want to know how we can prevent a case like this one to ever happen again. Let's talk about the Māori. In the Māori tradition, elders do not retire as such. They matter just as much, if not more, in old age, because an elder is the active custodian of everything a community knows, from ceremonies and protocols to the language in its fullest form, and to the stories the community tells each other to understand who they really are. So the connections that connect every living person to their ancestors and to each other. The standing of any tribe, which is called mana, is directly connected to the visible presence and authority of its elders. So let's go back to Arnold for a second. What had 84 years of living given him that was then lost when his son neglected him? What did Arnold still represent in old age and even in sickness? His memories, his stories, and his ways of seeing things, of looking at the world. 84 years of being alive is not nothing. In Māori tradition, which is called tikanga, which is their living law, abandoning an elder is seen as vandalizing the community's identity. Within that tradition, what happened to Arnold would not have been handled by court alone. The community would have come to Dennis, people who knew him, like his family and the community elders, and they would have asked him to account for himself. Not in legal terms per se, but in human terms. They would ask him what was going on with you. And they would ask him to look at what had happened to his father while he neglected him. And these questions would have been asked in front of the people that he loved and cared about, in front of the people who loved both of them, both the father and the son. And in Tikanga, the community would have also had to ask itself questions. How could we have missed this? Arnold is ours, and he carries our history, our stories, and our knowledge of who we are. How did we let him disappear like that? The failure wouldn't just have fallen on Dennis. It would have fallen on everyone who knew Dennis and Arnold and had looked away. In this case, Dennis had to go to court, but he didn't have to look his father in the eye and the people he loved in the eye and explain to them why he did what he did. He paid a legal debt, but the human debt of what he actually did to Arnold was something he never had to face. Arnold's community, if he had one in that sense, never had to own up to what they neglected to see, or where they chose to look away, how they let this happen. The Māori process is a slower one, it's a harder one, and it's a more uncomfortable one than just a conviction. But there is evidence that it works. Research on restorative justice consistently shows that people are much less likely to reoffend and that victims are very satisfied with the outcome of these processes. Our Western system mostly answers the question, what do we do with Dennis? The Tikanga process asks a harder one and a broader one. The question in this case is, what do we do with what happened? But also, what did it cost? What did we all miss? And how is that possible? And what, if anything, do we owe Arnold now? Dennis, in such a case, wouldn't just disappear into a prison only to come out unchanged and sometimes worse off. He has to stay and sit with the people who know him and his father and look them in the eye and explain himself not as a defendant per se, but as a son. And if you think that that sounds lenient, it's not. It is easier to do the 6 months and the 2 years of probation than look the one that you harmed in the eye. I think this also points to something that is also going on in Western societies, and that is that we increasingly do not value our elders. We tend to see them as an unwanted responsibility and even a burden. Now, Arnold was alone for 2 years, and that's not because Dennis was uniquely evil or very intent on hiding this whole thing, but because nothing in the way we've organized society makes Arnold's presence matter too much. The Māori see that differently. To them, the elder is not a burden to be managed, it's the most valuable thing that any community has. And that's a structuring principle in Māori culture. It changes how you build family, how you organize community, even what you notice and what you don't notice. Also interesting, Western law's answer to the whole situation is putting Dennis in jail, right? The logic is you punish Dennis and then the next potential Dennis will think twice before doing anything like it. The Māori approach, however, is not trying to scare the next Dennis. It's trying to build a community where the next Dennis is never alone long enough for things to get to that point. One of those approaches is reactive, while the other one is structural. One is a game of whack-a-mole, while the other one is asking, do we want to play this game at all? And the answer is no, we really don't want to play this game. Another interesting aspect to me is that in the West, we have a tendency to other these kind of cases. Much of the conversation, the narrative surrounding the case, takes place in the media at a far enough safe distance so that you can other it. But that also makes it so we don't look at ourselves and ask ourselves, at least not sufficiently, the question, how do we create a community, a society where a Dennis and an Arnold and this whole situation can just not happen? In Māori culture, the tikanga doesn't allow you to take that distance. You are in the room. You're part of what failed. And the question isn't only what did Dennis do, it's what did we all do or neglect to do or ignore for it to come to this? And what can we do going forward to prevent this? If you made it till here, I'm very curious. What do you think of the two different approaches? And if someone died today and made you boss of things, which one would you choose or what would you do? Tell me in the comments. This is the first part of a series that I'm making where I look at indigenous cultures and their solutions for some of the problems that we're encountering. Not because they're always better, but because they're always interesting. So if you're interested in that, follow along.